Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, before we begin with testimony again, I'll ask this witness as well. Do you have a particular title you go by? Agent, officer, et cetera?
Rick Schmitt.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt, then I do want to inquire, have you been observing in any way any of the trial testimony that's taken place since this case started?
I
Or
did
five.
the,
This was the issue that was brought up on the sidebar earlier.
Oh, okay. And counsel, could we have a brief, quick second sidebar on that? All right, counsel, thank you for the reminder. We are going to have the jurors just quickly line up and wait out in the hallway for a moment while we take up a brief matter outside your presence, and then we'll have you return right back in for additional testimony here.
all right, please.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, counsel, we had the jurors excused for a moment. In a sidebar, I was notified there may have been an issue with some inadvertent exposure to trial testimony by this witness. We thought it was something that would best taken up outside the jurors' presence. I believe the state identified the issue, and perhaps we could just have a quick question of the witness on this, or I'll just, based on the proffer, I guess, pose the question. Mr. Schmidt, it was advised to the court that you may have overheard some trial testimony of a previous witness. Is that correct?
Yes,
And what was it that you recall hearing that was testified to in the case?
it was by Ron Arnold. He said, when Mr. Pryor asked him a question, he said, I don't know, you own the property, you tell me.
And how was it that you came about hearing that?
I was playing on a device when I came home from work that my wife was watching, and
Okay, and beyond that, did you listen to or hear any other trial testimony?
no,
Okay, and certainly I understand those things can happen. I want to make clear, I'm not saying you've done anything wrong here, other than we need to get the issue out on the record before you testify. So knowing that that comment was overheard, does the defense, I'll start with you, Mr. Pryor, do you have any questions for him in regards to what he may have heard on that?
No, none whatsoever.
All right, does the state have any questions for the witness before we move on to that?
No.
Okay, we'll go ahead and have the jurors brought back in. I just wanted to not bring that fact up again in front of the jurors since they were instructed to disregard it previously. So the jurors can return and you can just start on with your direct at that time. Thank you, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
all right.
Here's off the counter for you.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, Mr. Pryor, if you'd like to commence with direct, you may.
Good afternoon, Mr. Schmidt.
Hi.
At some point, you were referred to as Officer Schmidt. Is that right?
Yes,
That was in June of 2019, 2020.
yes.
And which department were you with, sir?
The Rexburg Police Department?
Okay. At some point, you were assigned a task to participate in some sort of excavation or shovel work on June 9th of 2020 on the Daybell property. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Okay. Do you recall testifying in a previous proceeding last April of 2023 and being asked questions about boundaries and your role in that task that you were tasked with?
yes,
Okay. Do you recall being asked about whether or not there were any boundaries given at that point when you were testifying last April of 2023?
yes.
Do you recall what your response was?
I said there was no boundaries.
Okay. And then you were asked a question about whether or not they said, here's a shovel, go out there and find some stuff. Do you recall being asked about that as well?
Yes,
Do you recall what your response was?
yes.
What was your response?
Something to the fact that, something like that.
Okay. Would it help to refresh your recollection if I showed you something?
Yes,
Judge, may I have the could I have the deputy provide the officer with a transcript of his testimony? And
Yes, you may.
where the asterisk is there. Just have him read it, just the first line in the answer.
All right, so this is being proffered to refresh his recollection. Is that
Yes,
correct?
Judge. And officer, after you read it, then the deputy will run it back to me. He'll show you where he wants you to read. Now, officer, in that hearing back in April of 2023, you were asked just, hey, here's a shovel, go out there and find some stuff. Do you recall being asked that?
yes,
And what was your response?
pretty much.
Is it possible your response was yes?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
pretty much.
Oh,
Pretty much was in there too.
okay. Pretty much was in there as well. Judge, I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. Cross from the state.
Good afternoon, Mr. Schmidt.
Hi.
Do you still have that transcript up with you?
No,
You were asked about the morning or the events that took place on Chad Daybell's residence on June 9th, 2020, correct?
yes,
And you were asked about some answers you gave in a prior evidentiary hearing.
yes.
Judge, could we have a sidebar?
Yes. All right, thank you. The court, in a sidebar there, just discussed with counsel some terminology in the questioning. There was a reference to a term evidentiary hearing made in the cross-examination. The court would instruct the jurors to disregard that term evidentiary hearing and just have a reference that a hearing took place. So, Mr. Wood, if you'd like to continue with your cross, you may.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt, you were asked about your involvement on June 9th, 2020.
Yes,
And where were you that day?
on Chad Daybell's property.
And you were asked about a couple of specific questions you were asked last year.
Yes,
Let's talk about that real quick. You were asked about boundaries.
yes,
Do you recall what that question was in regards to?
no,
Would it refresh your memory to see a transcript of what you testified to last year?
yes. Okay.
And if you can put that down, thank you. Do you recall, in relation to what were you asked about boundaries?
In the search, a grid search.
All right. And do you recall what specific area you were searching or that you were asked about searching in regards to those boundaries?
Yes, the fire pit and the pet cemetery areas.
As you sit there today, do you recall there being any type of grid or boundary at those areas when you were searching?
I don't, just right inside the fire pit and then the pet cemetery area. No specific boundaries in relation to those areas.
Do you recall seeing any type of grid placed on the ground?
I don't remember that.
You were also asked about something to the effect of being handed a shovel and walking around.
Yes,
When you first arrived at Mr. Daybell's property, what was the first thing you did?
I don't recall the first thing that I did.
Okay. At any point, did you have a shovel
Yes.
and walk around the property?
Yes,
And was that something you were instructed to do?
yes.
Do you recall who instructed you to do it?
I believe it was Steve Daniels.
And do you recall who Steve Daniels is?
He's FBI. He's with the forensic. I think he was in charge of the scene that day.
So in fact, weren't you told before the search really got going in any specific areas to look around the property and see if you saw anything irregular?
Judge objection goes beyond the scope of direct.
Overruled.
Yes,
And were you with anyone else when you did that?
yes.
Who were you with? Do you remember?
I remember Colin Erickson from the police department and Travis, I can't remember his last name, but he was FBI. And we were instructed to walk around the field and look for soft spots or different areas that looked different.
If I may have one moment, Your Honor.
You may.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right.
Judge, there will be no further questions from the defense.
Very well. That'll conclude your testimony then, Mr. Schmidt. Was either side intending to have him held under subpoena until the trial's done?
Not from the defense, Judge. Thank you.
Not from the state.
Okay, then you're released from the subpoena. Thank you for coming in and testifying today. You're welcome.